Hi, everyone. This is Trish Kendall, your host for the Choose and Become interview series. I am here this morning with my friend and colleague, Tim Washer. Tim, just say hi really quick. All right.
Hey, everybody.
So
Thanks
it
for coming.
is, just so you know this, Tim, it is probably like pitch black in my room because it's April 3rd in Boston and it looks like it's winter outside. It's disgusting. Like, what's going on in your neck of the woods?
It's snowing. I live in Connecticut in the New York City suburbs, about an hour north of Manhattan, and it is snowing. And we had a beautiful. We usually trail run on Thursdays at 6, but like 3 of us are injured, so we just did a nice hike through with
But you
walkers. We
still
have
did
walkers,
it.
and we still did it, and it was beautiful. It's so pretty when it's snowing.
Oh.
It's really nice, but it's slippery, so you take it easy. But
Yeah.
it's great. Yeah. It was a
You're
gift.
okay. So you're awesome. We're going to pick that up later too, because I do follow you and I see all of the active outside things that you do. And so I'm going to pick that up later. So for anybody who does not follow this show, I just want to take a step back before moving forward to set some context around the interview. I made 5 critical choices on my journey from the pit of despair to the peak of success, to my enduring success. And the premise of this interview series is that I want to and do interview the people that I admire, like Tim, to pull their lessons and experiences and words of wisdom as it relates to their journey to enduring success. But I use the 5-choice framework. So Tim is on board. He knows I'm going to ask him these questions, but it's really just for Tim and I to give you a little bit of a peek into a conversation that he and I would have, really with just the two of us, if we were sitting down at dinner before the TEDx talk. So that's the other thing, is that Tim and I were able to experience together TEDx Walden Pond. So I'm just going to stop for a second. And Tim, will you give my audience and our audience a little bit about you?
Sure. So I am a father of 2 kids. I got divorced about 10 years ago. It's amazing how that becomes such a part of my identity that I mentioned first. But we're supposed to be in court tomorrow, so it's top of mind again. So I am a comedian. I started off in marketing, went to business school, and then in Texas at UT Austin, then moved up to New York City based on a recommendation by one of my professors. When I got to New York City, I realized that my calling was comedy. And so I started improv. First thing I did is took an improv class at Upright Citizens Brigade. And Amy Poehler was my instructor. This is a few years before she got on to SNL. And then she got on SNL, and I got to do a little bit of work with her there, write for her, and on Weekend Update. And then just started working with some of the late night shows, Conan O'Brien when he was in New York, and John Oliver. I still do stuff on John Oliver occasionally. But now, and I wasn't able to pay the bills with that. I know I had pressure from my wife at the time. She really wanted me to work at a full-time job with dental benefits. So I got a job at IBM because they had a job opening in their communications and events group. So I was a speechwriter, and then also worked with the events team and got to MC and speak at some of their events and that kind of thing. So that opened up the door to keynote speaking. And I started doing a lot. That was 2006, 7. So I've been doing keynote speaking since then. And then also still doing some work with brands, helping them market and use humor to connect with their audiences and build trust that way.
So I giggle a little bit. I giggle a little bit about your needing dental benefits. And I think we've talked about this before, but Joe and I, my husband and I, met in acting school, and he was doing improv in Chicago at IO.
Yeah. I knew he was an improviser. Yeah. He went to IO, right?
Yeah,
Improv
exactly.
Olympic.
And almost the same little bit of journey or path was, oh, I probably need health insurance. So anyway, but unlike you, you have still made an incredibly enduring career matching up what you love to do with what you are so good at. And for everyone here, Tim's a bit humble here. You help companies globally, companies, leaders, and individuals. And I'm not going to say this right, but the way that I think about you is taking the art and science of improv and stand up to create better business performance. And so you have figured out how to marry what you love to do and what you're great at, and that it's good business. Okay. So let me take a step back again. I think we all have our own definition of success. You and I got into a conversation about what creating enduring success means when we were sitting at the dinner table the night before TEDx Walden Pond. We hit it off like this, and I could have talked to you for 2 hours, could have talked with you for 2 hours. So we started getting into this. I'd like to pull some of that out for this interview. When you think about creating enduring success, what does that mean to you?
So, there's a lot of talk about, following your passion and following your purpose. And I do think that that's a key component of it. And, when following, like, I remember a moment in comedy, you get, the thing about stand-up comedy is you get immediate feedback. People either like the joke and they'll laugh, or they'll kind of like it and you need to tweak something, or there's crickets. It's just dead silence. And that helped me become such a better writer, because you knew immediately how people respond to the words you've put together. And I remember a time when I realized, you know what, this job is really for me. For me, it's not about getting laughs. It's really about getting up there and saying what I am supposed to say. And that's connected to my faith. I feel like I believe in God, and I think God called me to do this work. And I feel like he wants me to talk about how I've been broken, and how all of us have been broken, and we all dealt with shame, and how I've dealt with regret and shame and mistakes I've made as a parent and those kind of things. And I feel like as a comedian, of course, you have an obligation to make people laugh. And it makes it a lot easier to talk about shame and struggle and in that moment of despair, which I've had many of, and actually just recently. But I think that's what makes it work long term, is when you can say, all right, this is my purpose. And the usual measures and metrics of success that typically apply may be different based on my purpose. And I think that changes how you approach each performance. And I do that now, even in the past few years, I've become a lot more open to, I'll write material, I'll prepare, but I'll be a lot more open to just getting up there and improvising and saying what comes to me in the moment, or based on something, like if I'm at a conference, something that's somebody talked about a struggle they were dealing with in their industry, and sharing a bit about that. And also being open to have a corporate comedy set, where there is some quiet moments, and there are some moments of reflection, and there's some moments of talking about struggle and pain and regret and coming out of that. So I think getting in line with what you're really supposed to do in life.
And you've embraced it. You figured it out, and then you embraced it. And I do kind of think that's a two-step choice. What is my purpose, and am I going to embrace it in all of my actions and let it manifest in my life?
Oh, right. Yes, definitely. And that second piece is much more difficult. It's much more difficult. And part of me, let's see, I don't know if this is connected to comedy so much, but a big part of my growth that's even happened just in the last couple of months is being at peace when things don't go my way, or when we have an improv principle.
No, tell me, because I won't remember anything. Yeah.
Okay. So it's there is order in chaos, this belief that there's order in chaos. And that's when you're doing a long form. And we talked a little bit about the Herald format, when you're doing a long form improv show, that's much more theatrical. You know, it's not like short form improv is what you've seen on what whose line is it anyway? You know, it's quick and
Mm-hmm.
gamey. You know, and but long form is more theatrical. You're building a set of 9 different scenes in 3
Wow.
acts, all based on one suggestion from the audience. And one of the principles you need to follow to make this work for you to be at peace getting up on stage is that there's order and chaos. And so you'll get up there in the first 2 scenes, you're like, you have no idea how this is going to come together, and it makes no sense. But as an improviser, you're at peace with it. You're like, okay, we're going to figure this out. I mean, it's going to come to us. We'll discover it. You're not inventing, you're discovering, and you're surrendering. You know, it's like, okay, let's just get up there and let's listen and serve and support each other, and we'll see what
That's
comes
awesome.
to us. And there are a lot of parallels to that with my faith. It's funny how close my faith is to improv. It's, you know, it's a lot about surrender. It's a lot about supporting your partner, which I see as loving your neighbor, who is everyone. And yeah, okay, I
Doesn't
forgot
matter.
what I was talking
I
about. We were
got
talking
it.
about something.
I got it. How about this? So the first critical choice I made on my journey to enduring success was to pick up the phone when my sister called. You know the story. This isn't the platform.
Yes.
Most people know the story. But so for me, that first choice was profound. What I've since then, I have made other first choices that weren't so profound, that were much more practical. But what I have come to believe, or what I learned in that moment of picking up the phone with my sister, is that success begins with making a first choice. Like, nobody can choose for us. We have to make it. And so what I'm curious about is, what is a first choice that you've made on your journey that when you reflect, you know it has impacted where you're at today?
So definitely the first thing is when I realized my calling is to work in a comedy, in comedy, it was immediately followed by fear. Fear came right after that. It was like, there's no way I want to do this. And like my dad, you know, part of that's his value I had growing up. My dad's a Presbyterian minister, and he's one of the most humble people you'll ever meet. And I admired so much his humility. And he never looked for the limelight. And when people would put the attention on him, he always would deflect it to somebody else. And I was like, well, now how do I reconcile that with going someplace and saying, hey, look, I think I'm funny. I want the microphone. And it was really difficult to do that. But I finally got to a point where it's like, okay, look, if this is my calling, that's what I'm supposed to do. And I can still have humility inside of this and saying, yeah, I want to step up, and I do believe I have something to share. That's taken me a long time to believe that I have something of value to share with people. But I think when you talk about your brokenness, as you know very well, it's such a beautiful gift to people, because they feel like, hey, I'm not alone in this world, you know, and somebody's been down in this hole before where I am, and they found a way out. And now they're up there on stage sharing their brokenness. But this is going to be a ladder for me to get out of this hole of despair. So that definitely taking that first step of saying, because I didn't even want to tell people that I was a comedian. I thought that was such an arrogant thing to say. Because if I tell you what do you do? I'm a comedian. I'm telling you that I think I'm funny. And to me, that was, I thought that was an arrogant thing to say, but it's not. It's like, it's not me. It's a gift I've been given. It's a spiritual gift I've been given. All 8 billion of us have a spiritual gift. We all have a spiritual gift. And this is my spiritual gift, and I need to be a good steward of it. And I am not being a good steward of it by hiding it, by burying that talent and saying, look, I'm, you know, who am I to get up there and be funny if that's what I've been called to do?
And in that vein, that you've honed your craft. I mean, it is a craft. It's a gift. It is a gift, but it is a craft. And
that's right.
And I hear what you're saying about who am I too. You know, like when I first started my journey of really creating a business around inspirational speaking, I was like, I'm an inspirational speaker. It was almost like I had to really work on and come to terms with and own and embrace, I am I inspire, right? Like you are a comedian. That is a gift. I have a gift. All billion of us have a gift. What we do with that gift is a choice. Mm-hmm.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And I remember at TEDx, uh, boy, that was a tough journey to go through with you listening to your story. It was hard for me, but it gave me so much
Mm.
hope at the end. And I remember, look, we had a lot of good speakers there. You were the only one who got a standing
Oh.
ovation, and I think it was because by far yours was the most vulnerable. And I think you were the one who opened up and shared about your brokenness in such a profound way that it moved people emotionally,
Well.
and that was encouraging for me to see. Okay, this is how you do
And
it.
there was a reason
And
were the wrap-up speaker, right? And so how about
because they forgot, they kept bumping me. That's what it was. They were like,
Tim,
Nick
you're
kept
gonna be, but
bumping me.
you wrapped us up, which was just awesome. And but before I go to the second choice, I'm actually with your TEDx is called Follow the Fear, and follow the fear is a first choice you made is to follow your fear.
Uh,
Right? Look at you.
that's right. It is, and it is. And I did that on many
Mm-hmm.
occasions, but I still struggle with it. Like I called you last week because I wasn't able to follow my fear. So there are moments, and I said this in the speech. There's moments when I can follow the
Mm-hmm.
fear and do this, but there's moments when I get stuck and this is like the first choice. It's like, what's the first step
Yes.
I can take? What's a simple step I can take, and let me see what
Mm-hmm.
happens. But in the last couple of months, I've been trapped and had a hard time. Uh, I just got lost again, and I had a hard time uh, taking
Mm-hmm.
that first step in many ways. And as I told you, reaching out and asking if I could have a conversation with you, that was a choice that I made, and that was a step that I made, and it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy, but
And I embraced it,
I mean,
and
I
we
had
felt
faith.
so. And we had,
You did,
and look at,
you
and
did.
then we were on the phone on Monday, or we're catching up on Monday, and I was like, okay, I am not procrastinating this anymore because it is so. And I
Yeah,
know, like, I'm totally going off here. There is something about human nature that gets in the way of asking someone else for something. And the fact of the matter, like, I had procrastinated asking you to be a guest because I know you're so busy. I know you're traveling around the world. I know you do all those things. And I'm like, well, who am I that Tim is going to choose to spend some time? But you know what I mean? And look at us.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
I do know what I mean.
It's,
That's the same thing
yeah.
I
So
felt
how about
about
this? Get over
calling
it,
you.
world. Get
Yes,
over it. Right.
that's so important to. That's one thing we really need to do is show up, and whether that's picking up the phone, whether that's sending an email. Like I was thinking about it this
Yeah.
morning on the run with these guys. Uh, I'm not I still struggle with that. Like, who am I to be out there running with these? Because these are great trail runners, but there are times when they're injured, and even when I'm just going slow or I got a problem, that's holding me up, one of us will fall back and run with the injured
Hmm.
person. But it is such a gift to be out there with these guys. And I really, and we just walked today, it was just a hike. And I wish more people would explore that and just get out and go for a short hike because it is so good for your mind and body. And it really helps you get out of a dark place. It can really help you get
Hmm.
out of a dark place. And I just remember thinking I could never do this. And then I started, you got better and better, and you get to a point where you can run trails.
Yeah, and you've
Yeah.
created a community, which is going to take me to my fourth critical choice that I want to explore with you. Before I jump there, I do want to get your perspective on the second critical choice, which for me was to commit to a two-way agreement. And that two-way agreement at the time was between me and my sister and her husband, who took me in. Now, what I learned or what I felt was the force of committing to a two-way agreement. And that for me, actions that started from a place of I have to do these things. It really transformed to I want to. And it was the first time in my life that I experienced joy in the ordinary because of that agreement and because of committing to it. I think we commit to two-way agreements all the time, informally or formally. I'd like your perspective on the idea of a two-way agreement, and if there is one that you would share where you would say this agreement, by committing to it, really elevated my experience and my journey. And I have a feeling of one for you, but I'm not going to answer for you.
Okay. But I'm curious about it. Look, what I think of is how the problem that I've had showing up for a lot of two-way agreements for
Okay,
most
keep
of my
going.
life, and that's not having a hard time standing up for myself, and also coming to that agreement feeling that I'm unworthy of love. That's something I've dealt with since I was a kid. And unfortunately, that's been a big part of of the relationships I've been in, the romantic relationships. I'm a marriage, and where I've entered a relationship is we had a couples therapist who helped us get divorced, who was wonderful, and I'll never forget. She told me, like on our, she met with us together, and then she met with us both individually, and we came back, and the very first thing she said, just as I was sitting down, she said, "You know what your problem is?" And I'm, you know, you feel undeserving of love, and you need to and so you married somebody who didn't love you. And she said, "Look, you are an accommodator. You feel like you're not good enough, so you do all these actions and these things to try to accommodate, for what you feel is not worth." And man, she told me this thing. She said, "You need to find somebody who loves you for breathing." And I was like, "Oh my God. I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know somebody would love you just for who you were, who I was, but I mean, it took me a minute to get my head around it." But she was like, "Yeah, just find somebody in this world who loves you for who you are and quit working so hard at it." And look, relationships, they take a lot of work. And I'm going to find somebody who works as hard as I am, as I do in a relationship. But at the same time, I want to show up in a two-way agreement with somebody who says, "Look, we got grace for each other. We're going to give each other, we're going to forgive each other, but we're both going to be working toward the same direction in this thing. Let's commit and have a covenant that we're going to be, that we're going to be both equally devoted to one another and give and take, but always try to turn toward each other whenever we can. And also speak up. We're going to both feel safe, create a safe place where we can speak up and open up, be vulnerable, and then because we want to know one another." And that's taken me a long time. I don't even know if I'm still there yet fully. I don't know. As far as a relation, God, this.
Well, can I?
Well, look, I have one in
But
mind.
I gotta
Yeah,
just go into this conversation for a minute. So
okay.
a few minutes ago, when we were talking about making a first choice, and it was about follow your fear, and that I think you used. I'm going to paraphrase. These will be my words, but that's a choice that you have to continuously make, and sometimes you choose to do it, and sometimes you choose not to do it.
Yes.
So I've got to make the parallel here because it's Tim and Trish. So, like the fifth choice I made, which we will dive into, is to embrace my boundless capacity to give love and to receive love, which is a choice. And what people, I think, wrongly assume is that once I made that choice, I never had to make it again. But in fact, it is an active, almost daily choice to embrace all the love for myself, Trish, and to give all the love to someone else. Because I still hold on to fear and fear of rejection, fear of not being worthy, fear of being too much, fear of all those things. And I hear you say that, with struggling with, feeling like worthy of being loved. And I'm blown away by that because most often I feel like I'm the only one. And it's not true.
Oh, right. No, you're right. It's not. I think so many of us feel that way. And we approach the world with mask, to hide that.
Mhm.
Sometimes it comes off as arrogance with some people.
Yes.
Sometimes that's why I always connect. When I walk into a room of people, it's the wallflowers who
Hmm.
I'm drawn to. And it's the people who don't seem to engage, who are kind of quiet, who need to be pulled in, or need to be noticed, and need to feel like they're seen. I think they
Hmm.
need that the most. And so, feeling the same way, knowing what that feels like, that's kind of where I start to connect with people. And you know what? I'm actually kind of, not kind of, but for the person who takes up a lot of space and seems overly confident and maybe even a little pretentious. That's a person I
Interesting.
avoid.
Mhm.
The gregarious person, because, yeah, I just tend to avoid that
Mhm.
person. And so I guess, I don't know, getting back to a two-way agreement, it would be hard for me to make a two-way agreement with somebody like that, where I'd be a lot more comfortable doing that with someone who I feel, uh, is more
Hmm.
like me.
Yeah.
Is probably struggling with
Yeah.
same
Well,
things I
this is
am.
probably going to lead me to my third. The third critical choice I made was to build trust. A little comment that you made me think of there is, when we think about inspiring the trust of others, we are more likely to trust someone who is like us than someone whom we like. There is that connection of someone who is like us versus, oh, you know what, he's funny or he's likable, or no,
Yeah.
this person is like me. So when I made this choice to build trust, it really started with, I had to build trust in myself because there was none, right? Like it just didn't exist. Then once I built trust in myself slowly, I then learned how to inspire the trust of others. So much so that a huge part of my business now, and you know that, as I work with teams and around inspiring trust internally and externally. So I believe in it so much. For you, I want to ask you probably two parts to building trust. I'd like to start with a time in which you've had to build trust in yourself, and how did you do it? Like, if you can dig deep and think about how you built trust in yourself or how you continue to. And then I'll get to inspiring the trust of others.
Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
I have a good example there. So, look, last year was a tough year for me, and, uh, just getting anything going. And part of that, I know part of that is just this, getting dragged back to court all the time. It's just, we can't, you gotta, when in a divorce, that was 9 years ago. And at some point, it's hard to heal when somebody's still wanting to fight about stuff. And so, that really was that was a tough year for me last year. And I realized I was lacking a lot of confidence. I was just getting stuck and having a hard time moving forward. And so I decided I wanted to build some evidence for myself that I can keep my promises to myself. So I decided, you know what, I'm gonna run the New York Marathon, and I'm gonna hire a coach. And what she did for me, and the funny thing was, I had to commit to talking to this coach, because her name's Heather Peck Knight, and she's won the Boston Marathon. She's won her division in the Boston Marathon 3 times, and she set the world record for the half marathon last year, in her division. I mean, she's amazing, and she works with all these people who qualify for the Olympics and things like that. And I thought, I have no business working with this woman, but I knew her. And, I wanted to meet with her and talk to her and say, let's both see if this might be a fit. But I assumed she was going to pass me on to somebody on her team who might have been a better fit. But I definitely had to get myself up. I had to get up the courage and build
Hmm.
my confidence to talk with her and, say, look, can we have this meeting and talk about this possibility? And, but I knew, if, I ended up, it's okay. I'm getting into a
No,
little bit of a
keep
long
going.
story, but let me tell you this. This was really cool. So I knew she's going to ask me about stats and what's your pace and this, that, what races do you want to, and all the, just all the stuff, the hardcore stuff, which I was not qualified to answer. But we get on the phone, we chat for a while, and then she says to me, I'm talking about something. She kind of stops me and she says, listen, why did you drop out of the Frozen Feet Challenge? And that's this, my friend Megan Searfoss owns this Richfield Running Company, and they have this from January 1st, I think, into mid-February. You sign up and you commit to doing a mile, either walking or running a mile outdoors every single day. And that's
And you
hard in
posted
Connecticut.
something
You get
recently
a
on
lot of
LinkedIn
snow.
that I saw, and you were not going to go for your walk, but you did. And that was just recently, and it was cold, and I see the air coming out of your mouth, and you're bundled up. Okay, so keep going. See, I'm along your journey with you. Keep going.
Yes, well, I appreciate that. I guess last year, Heather asked me why I dropped out, and I just sighed and I said, you know what? I believe this lie that I couldn't do it. I believe this lie that I just had so much going on with my life. My ex-wife and I were we had to go back to court on Valentine's Day, and not that that matters because there was no affection in our marriage. It wasn't. There's no sadness about that, but we were going back on Valentine's Day, and I allowed just the drama and the pain of everything, the pain and just meaning like accusations and things like that, and just having to defend yourself and stand up for yourself. And the fact that I didn't stand up for myself for the first, I don't know, 5 years after the divorce or the 20 years of marriage, there's a lot of regret about that. And I just got wound up in it. And one day I just said, screw it. Like I said in that video, I said, screw it. I'm not going. And it was kind of out of anger, I guess. But of course, that didn't serve you to drop out of something. It doesn't serve you. But I told her, I said, that was it. And I said, that's why I dropped out of it. That was my answer to her question. But that question just threw me. I was like, why in the world would you ask me that? But, she's just getting an idea of who I am and what I need. And so she says, okay, I'll take you, as a client. And, people wait for sometimes a year to become a client of hers. And I think she felt confident she could reach me. And so I get this workout. She's going to put a plan together. Here's how you're going to get ready for the marathon in November. And I know it's all going to be technical stuff that I don't know what she's talking about racing and pacing and all this stuff. And the number one thing on there is she says, okay, I want you to run with people who love you. And I was like, what? And I thought that was, I was so caught off guard that this woman who performs and at such a high level, is going to be able to reach me emotionally. I just was so caught off guard by that. And, but I was like, okay, I found the right person. And I'm so glad I got my confidence up because I'm certainly not qualified to work with her. If you think about the people who their goals and what they're trying to do. But again, that's shifting what we talked about in the first choice. It's this idea of like, let me look at the I hate this term, KPIs, the key performance indicators. Let me look at those differently. Maybe it's not about getting a laugh every time. Maybe it's about connecting with somebody. And maybe I just want to get out here and maybe I'm at a conference with 3,000 people. Maybe this message is for one person, who's in a really dark place right now. And maybe if I just let them know I've struggled with depression too, but I've found ways to manage it through being with friends, through laughing, through getting out on the trails. I've been through an ugly divorce too. I get that. Maybe it's just for one person and I'll never know. So I just count it as a win. I just say, okay, I know I got it, but I'll never know if it's right. I ran with Heather. She does these, my friend who owns the running store, Megan, I was running the trail. We were hiking the trails a week ago. And she saw a photo of me where I was with Heather down in New Canaan doing these speed workouts. And she was like, what are you doing? She said, what are you training for? you're doing speed workouts with Heather? I said, no, no. I just needed to be with Heather. I just went down there to be with her and she, we're running in at a high school track, and there's an inside loop, of course, which is always the fastest. And so, and I guess there's a little bit of a protocol to, if you're running slower, to move out to an outer lane, so the speedsters can get by quickly. And I just think it's a courteous, respectful thing to do. So I was out on the very last lane, which I did not beat. That tells you something about where my mind was in. I was the very last lane. And Heather says, move to the inside lane. She said, you deserve to be here. And I was like, man, this woman gets me, and she knew what I was doing on the outside lane. And anyway.
And you went to the inside lane.
I did. And I was very respectful there were like 5 or 6 other women there training with me, and they're all killers. I mean, they're all just, sub-3 marathons training for, amazing people. And so, but of course I was courteous. I got out of their way when they came up. And, but those women too, they're so kind to me when I show up there. They don't look down at me for being slow or anything, but they're really kind to me. And it makes me feel, it makes me feel worthy just to go spend time there.
Take action. First off, you listened to advice from someone you respect, and then you take action on that advice, which is a choice. And action after action starts to create and build more trust in the things that we're doing and the choices that we're making. And I don't need to be on the outside lane. In fact, I can be in the inside lane and still be true to who I am from a respect standpoint with others, but I'm worthy of being in the inside lane. And I think that's awesome. And the other thing that made me think about the story here is the two-way agreement that you entered into between you and Michelle, right? Michelle, I got it right. Michelle. Heather. Sorry, where did it?
Coach?
Yeah.
You're right.
Heather.
You're right.
But because to me, like, I think about that two-way agreement because it requires you to commit. She committed to you. You committed to her. You completed the New York Marathon, but it's the experience along the way of building trust in yourself and then creating, this, I'm worthy.
That's right. Yeah.
But it just made me think about it because that's, and I think it coincides out. You started teeing me up for the 4th critical choice when we were talking about actually twice, especially when Heather said, run with people you love. So the 4th critical choice I made was to create community and belonging. And for me, I was 30 years old and I had created more professional success than I could ever imagine. We had talked about this on Monday, not success, but I had an enduring professional career with the consulting firm Hewitt Associates. And I just thought, oh my gosh, like I've made it. I'm independent. I don't have to rely on anyone. I pay my bills, they want me, all of those amazing things, until I looked around and really realized that I was friendly with everyone, but I was friends with no one. I had never throughout my entire life felt like I belonged anywhere. And I then just had perpetuated that almost through a badge of honor. And then I was like, oh, hold on. I actually want that. And so I went on my own journey, which you and I talked about, which was I started running for the very first time and met my group of women who became my first community. And I learned that community and belonging requires action and reciprocity. Like it doesn't just occur. You have to actually make it happen.
Right.
So I want to keep going here with you. I know how important community is to you, and then couple and running, and you are just like after my heart with this. But I want to start with, what does it feel like to not belong?
Oh, oh, that's the worst. Yeah. Ugh. I just got the feeling that I really don't like.
Mhm.
It's because I've felt isolated quite a bit, and let me think through that. Like I remember in 2015 when I got separated, I moved out, and my kids were only with me half time, and that was really strange to get adjusted to for the days they weren't with me.
Yeah.
I, I used to watch. We used to watch a show together on. It was a Disney show called Good Luck Charlie, and we used to watch that together. And I would find myself when my kids weren't with me, I'd watch the show,
Yeah.
and it would kind of bring me some joy, but it would also bring some sadness. But and you know what else I did, Trish? I went to Trader Joe's, 4 times a week just to be around people. And the people who work there are friendly, and you feel safe asking them a question because they kind of have to respond and tell you where the, you know, whatever the fat-free yogurt is and stuff. So, but I got to know people there, and really, it's embarrassing, but that was my community. And I was really involved in our church, and but I at the divorce, going through the divorce, I just fell out of that, partly because my ex was still going there, and I didn't want to be that. Just there was tension, and then I don't know. I think I probably felt unworthy of
Mhm.
God, and I knew that wasn't true. That's not true. It's a terrible thing to think that, but I felt that way, and I pulled away from church, which is terrible because that's look. I know a lot of people have a lot of hurt with church, and I understand. I understand that, but I got to tell you, if you find the right house of worship, uh, man, that's where, like I tell my kids, I'm at a different church now, and I'm like, listen, and I'm really good friends with like the several of the pastors there. I mean, like best friends, and one of them I meet once a week for lunch, and he's hysterical, and so I think it's so important in your community find people who make you laugh, who you can be silly with,
Hmm.
because being silly is being vulnerable. And so when you're building community, that's key. Find those people and then be around them, not just phone calls and texts, but that's important too. But also make time to schedule a weekly meeting if you can do that, or every other week, but get it in the calendar. This is what I did with my friend Brian, who was the pastor. We scheduled a week every Wednesday lunch, and sometimes we'd have to move it, but it was
That's
on the calendar,
awesome.
and that really helped me stay connected with him. And then yeah,
And that takes
yeah.
and it
I
takes nurturing that community. I mean, those are
man,
manifestations of what it means to like
yes,
nurture something. It just doesn't exist on its own.
no, that's a very important point. Like when I went to a new church, and for people who do this, sometimes they'll go, "Yeah, it's a community." I know so many people who say, "I went there once, but nobody was friendly." Well, did you introduce yourself to somebody? And I introduce myself to people. I'll do it 3 or 4 times the first time I meet them,
Mhm.
and just say my name, give them my name again, and just make it easier to talk. Because if we had met once and then I saw you again and I didn't remember your name, it just makes it a little bit. The tendency often is, and the choice we often make is, let me avoid you so I don't be
Yeah.
embarrassed about
Yeah,
not
right.
remembering your name. You know, or either I'll use some generic name. Hey, coach, there she is. That nonsense. But just
Yeah.
ask. Well, tell me your name. I'm Tim. And when you go there, reach out to people and say, if you go and try again, whatever community is that you're going to join for the first time, meaning just showing up. You know, before you go, visualize it and think what it's going to be like to be a little uncomfortable and
Very
introduce
good.
yourself, and think about something you could talk about, like we're going like a bike club. What Go there and just say, look, I've got a bike. I haven't ridden it for 10 years, which was my case. But I'd like to, can you tell me how do I connect with people who are just starting out? Go there with a question in mind that you're going to feel comfortable asking somebody.
That's awesome.
And oh, it's so
Mhm.
key because Getting there is one thing. Having the courage to say hello is a whole different thing. And so find ways to make that easier for yourself, and then go do that. Yeah.
The fifth critical choice I made was to finally embrace my boundless capacity to give love, the verb, the action, the choice, and to receive love from others, to actually accept what they wanted to give. Now, giving love or receiving love, the verb, the action, I think manifests in different ways for different people all the time. And we've interwoven this in our entire conversation. When you think about giving love or receiving love, the verb, the action, what are one or two ways that that manifests in your life?
Mm. It's so much of it showing up. Like I have a good friend from one of my good friends from church. We're in this small group. Our church encourages to break up into crews where you have like you meet with 2, 3, maybe 4 people, the same gender. You try to meet with them once a week, and you're on a text thread and you check in with each other, let each other know when you're struggling. So one of my buddies sends out a text to us saying, "Hey man, my daughter was just in a bad accident. We are in, she's going into the MRI shortly. We're at the hospital." And when I get that text, the request is that the church is, pray for me. But I get that text, and I was out, and I was like 10 minutes from the hospital, and I was just like, you know what, I'm going to go over there. And so I got there, and I texted my buddy, and I said, "Hey, I'm in the ER waiting room praying for you. If you have a time, I know you probably don't have time, but if you have time to step out and say hello, let's do that." And so he comes out, and he has 4 kids. And so 3 of the other kids come out and said, "Look, let me take them to go get milkshakes just so they can get away from this anxiety. And we'll come back. And then you and your wife can have a little private time." And so, the funny thing is I used to see my dad do that all the time. And that's the thing you do that's what you do. If somebody's hurting, you show up. If somebody has surgery, you just, you like in the South, you make a casserole
Yes.
and you show up at a casserole. And that's my buddy Mike, who is a coach of mine, and I run the trails with him. When he had surgery, I just said, "Okay, let me drop off something." And it's not about the food, of course. It's about fellowship and letting somebody feel that love and support by just bringing a meal over. And it doesn't have to be as complex as making a meal. But I think showing up for somebody in person is so critical. And if you can't do that, even making a phone call, like I'll call people on their birthday instead of just posting on Facebook or whatever. And they're floored by that. They're like, "What, does your phone dial out?" I mean, people just don't use their phone anymore. And so that's, just these connections, as human as it can be, meaning in person. By that, I mean, just being there in person, or at least making the phone call versus just a post. That just is so, oh my gosh, it makes all the difference in a relationship.
I appreciate that perspective across our whole lives. That example of the manifestation of giving love can show up personally, professionally. It's a choice in every interaction we have with a human being. And you said it perfectly, and I'll just repeat it. That's about relationships. Tim, you showed up when I asked you if you would invest your time with me today, not only your time, but you, the whole you, and sharing, how about this? Giving me your love and receiving the love that I wanted to give you.
Yeah.
I appreciate you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate you, Trish. I'm very grateful for your friendship. I'm grateful you took time with me Monday, I guess, and
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Well,
I really appreciate
how about this to everyone, to those that follow the Choose and Become interview series, and those of you who are new to the show, I am happy and honored for you to be along this journey with me as I continue my journey to enduring success and bringing Tim Washer along the way. You'll have all the ways to get in touch with him when you see this on LinkedIn. Check out Follow the Fear, his TEDx talk. And there could be more Tim and Trish, T squared, coming up along the way. Thank you, everybody. Choose and become. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Choose and Become interview series. To check out more episodes, go to www.trishkendall.com/podcast, or go to any of your favorite podcast channels, including YouTube, under Trish Kendall Speaks, and you'll find this interview and more. Choose and become.